Today, we're going to install a timing chain kit on a Honda 2.4-liter engine. You can either use Dayco part number KTC1360, which is our basic kit, or the Master Kit, part number KTC1387, which includes the balance chain assembly. For the purpose of this video, we'll be using the Master Kit. This job requires a Honda crank holding tool and a cam lock pin tool. You will also need a 6mm punch for the balance shaft chain replacement. Your first step is to remove the oil pan and valve cover from the engine. Rotate the engine to top dead center. The punch mark on the VCT and sprocket will be up when the two straight lines on the gears are facing each other. The arrow on the crank gear will point at the arrow cast into the engine. We recommend using a yellow paint pen on the marks to make the two straight lines on the cam sprocket easy to see. The VVT sprocket line should be at the 9 o'clock position and the cam sprocket line at the 3 o'clock position. This means the engine is at top dead center. Now, on the back of the engine, lock the camshafts in place using the cam lock tool, inserting both pins as shown to lock both sprockets in place. Next, you should remove the VCT oil control valve. Check the screen on the valve to be sure it is clean. Now remove the crankshaft pulley. Next, unscrew and remove the side engine mount bolts. The cam timing chain cover is now ready to come off. There are 3 bolts in front through the oil pan and 13 bolts through the front of the chain cover that must be removed. Please note there is a spacer inside the case on the crankshaft. Remove it as well and set it aside for reinstallation. Next, you need to reinstall the crank pulley and rotate the engine backwards to compress the timing chain tensioner. Use a retaining pin to keep the tensioner compressed. Slowly rotate the engine clockwise to realign all timing marks. Check the cam sprockets for alignment. Once complete, you can remove the tensioner and crank sprocket from the engine. Remove the upper chain guide, then the long chain guide and the tension pivot guide. Now pull off the cam chain. Next, our tech will replace the balance shaft chain and tensioner before beginning to install the primary timing chain. Remove the balance shaft chain tensioner. If you are not replacing it, be sure to remove the lock pins before rotating the engine. Then, remove the guide. Now use a 6mm punch to lock the oil pump balance shaft in position and remove the nut holding the sprocket on the balance shaft. Remove the chain and sprockets as an assembly and make sure the dowel pin on the balance shaft aligns with the mark on the oil pump. Next, assemble the new balance shaft chain and sprockets by aligning the mark on the oil pump sprocket between the 2 colored links on the chain, and then the single mark to the back of the crankshaft sprocket. Now it's ready to be installed on the engine. Make sure all components align accordingly. Then be sure the 6mm punch is in place before you reinstall the bolt and torque to 33 foot-pounds. Install the guide and tensioner and tighten the bolts to 8.7 foot-pounds. Recheck your timing marks and then activate the tensioner. Next, replace the exhaust camshaft sprocket and torque the bolt to 53 foot-pounds. Then it's time to install the primary timing chain. Check the links for 2 double and 1 single set of marks. The double sets will align to the marks on the camshaft sprocket, and the single one will align to the crankshaft sprocket. Install the long chain guide and torque the bolts to 8.7 foot-pounds. Then install the tensioner guide and the upper guide and torque these bolts to 16 foot-pounds. Now install the timing chain tensioner and torque the bolts to 8.7 foot-pounds. Then recheck all timing marks to ensure alignment. If all looks good, remove the tensioner pin. Then take out the cam sprocket holding pins on the back of the engine. Then reinstall the spacer onto the crankshaft. Now you can reinstall the timing cover, oil pan, and valve cover, making sure to follow proper torque and sealant procedures.